Hello guys, today I'm going to show you how to run an HTTP trigger within an Azure function in Azure Data Factory. So let's suppose that we have this block and we want to run an Azure function let's already debug it, in order to extract a file that we will have in an executable. This will be our example. So when we refresh, we have the file that we had here in the executable unzipped or unpacked. So for the Python code, in order to perform the action, I will leave in the description of the video my GitHub link with the script that you can check, and you can check the specifications if you don't understand by reading the comments. In my previous video, I explained the 3 parameters that you need to change, so this can work depending on the containers, on the name of the containers, and other things that you may have. It's pretty easy, but if not, just check my previous video. And yeah, so the purpose will be to run an Azure function that will run that will trigger actually this HTTP trigger, and this HTTP trigger will trigger our Python script that I will share in the link. So let's just go to Visual Studio. Is the only way where we can create an HTTP trigger. You cannot create it in the Azure portal. So the first thing that we need is first download the Visual Studio. Second, we go to extensions and be sure that you download these Azure tools. Okay, you write here Azure in the search section and you download Azure tools. Once we have this lovely icon with the A, then we will be able to assign our subscription. Just enter your email and your password, same as when you are entering in the Azure portal, and we will be able to see a couple of services here, and the most interesting for us will be this function app. Okay, first of all, we need to create a function app, and later we can create an HTTP trigger or other kinds of trigger within the function app. Okay, so first of all, let's create a function app, and let's imagine that we are creating it from scratch. New name for trigger. I'm just making this app. We will choose Python 3.9. I'm just putting the same configuration as this one here that I already created. Okay, so in ADF we trust is the storage that we have here and where we have our files. In your case, you will need to put yours. The select a hosting plan consumption, storage account again, the same one that we put before, and for application insights resource, let's make it simple and skip it for now. So let's imagine that this will run, and this will run successfully here. Okay, so now what we need to do is here within the functions we have HTTP trigger because we already deploy it from our local workspace. But first, before deploying it here, of course, we need to create our workspace, our local one here. In order to do it, for an HTTP trigger, we will create like this. Create new project. In our case, I already have here for Azure Function, which is just a folder here. Be sure that it's empty, the folder. So because this is the thing that you will deploy from your local machine to Azure, to your Azure account cloud. Let's imagine, okay, let's create it from scratch because you need to know some things. And let's see that it's here, and we would select this. We want it in Python. We want the model v1, and okay, we continue with Python. There was one thing more. We want an HTTP trigger. We want it with different name now to not override the other one, and we want it in authorization level with anonymous. We can add it to workspace, opening new video. Okay, add to workspace, and it will be added here, okay, in a couple of minutes. So in our use case for our example, let's imagine that we already created our workspace in Azure Function folder, and now what we will need to put here, it's here in Azure Functions, create a function. We want it within the Azure Function path. We want an HTTP trigger, and we want an HTTP trigger too. Anonymous always, so it doesn't give you any problem. And that's how you would create here the HTTP trigger too. Okay, so now the HTTP trigger too has this sorry for that. You can go here to Explorer, and here you have your Azure function. You have HTTP trigger 1, this is the one that we are going to deploy, and the HTTP trigger 2 that I just created. So the init py is the thing that we need to fill. So as an example, it will come like this, but for our case, I already gave to you the solution. So you just have to copy paste the script into the init.py, and later in the requirements.txt you need to ensure that these packages will be installed, okay? Azure Functions and Azure Storage Blob, because are the ones that will be used here and are not native from Python. So the only thing we need to do now is to deploy our Python code or HTTP trigger into our Azure Cloud account. So we are coming back to Azure here in this icon. We go to Functions. Here in the Function app, this is the Function app that we created. So we just click here, right click, and deploy to Function app. So deploy to Function app, we want to deploy the HTTP trigger that was here under this path. We created this before, so you know how to do it, but the HTTP trigger is located here. This is in our local workspace. So we just go here, deploy, and it will take a while, and it will be successfully deployed. So we just need to go now to our Azure portal. We would have here in the Function app run exe with Python here. And as we can see, we have our HTTP trigger here. And the HTTP trigger can be checked if it works by going to code plus test. Also, you can check the function keys here, so it will be later needed to configure in Azure Data Factory. Go to our test and run section here, and we will run the get command. We'll put the default function key, and we will run our HTTP trigger. And as we see, this is 200, so this is okay. If we see it here, we see that the HTTP trigger, it was there was no file here before, but when we refresh it, it appeared. So that means that it's working correctly. So once we check that here is working correctly, one problem that you may have is that you need to enable here in the Functions app something called cores, where when you click here, you need to enable this checkbox here. After this, if it's working with 200 code, we just need to go to Azure Function. We just click here in order to create an Azure function. So if we are putting here Azure, we just drag and drop this block. And here it's just a matter of, in our case, we have it already created. You will click new, but it's the same as if I click edit. And let's start from the beginning. You would go to from Azure subscription, you would put the one that you have. In our case, this one, run exec with Python, is the hours, our function app, and the function key. What you will need to put is just go to the function app, to the one that interested in. You go to the app keys, and you just copy paste the key that you have here, either the default one or the master. I'm going to copy paste the default one. You copy it here, authentication method anonymous, you save, and that's how it works. Once you run again your pipeline, it will run this HTTP trigger, and it will perform the code that you have in Python. And this is how easily you can do or you can run your Python code with Azure Functions. Thank you so much for watching.